What if I told you the next iPhone you're waiting to buy could literally disappear from the shelves? Imagine Apple fans camping outside stores only to be told, sorry, no stock available. Sounds crazy, right? Well, this nightmare scenario could actually happen if India, one of Apple's fastest growing production hubs, suddenly blocked iPhone manufacturing. And trust me, the ripple effects wouldn't just stay in India. They would shake the entire global economy. For decades, Apple relied almost entirely on China to produce its iPhones. But things started to change as US-China tensions escalated. Trade wars, rising labor costs, and Beijing's unpredictable policies pushed Apple to quietly diversify. And where did it look? India. In just a few years, India has gone from producing almost nothing to assembling around 12 to 15% of the world's iPhones, with plans to raise that to nearly 25% by 2027. That means 1 in every 4 iPhones could soon carry a Made in India tag. Foxconn, Pegatron, and Wistron, the 3 giants of Apple's supply chain, have invested billions into massive plants in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Foxconn alone employs more than 40,000 workers in its Chennai facility, and it has already announced a $600 million expansion to make more iPhones and even chip components locally. For Apple, India isn't just an experiment anymore. It's the lifeline of its long-term strategy to reduce China risk. But what if this plan B collapses overnight? Imagine the Indian government suddenly announcing that iPhone production must stop. Whether due to politics, a regulatory standoff, or national security concerns. The fallout would be immediate. Production lines would halt, shipments would freeze, and the global iPhone supply chain would face a massive choke. Remember the iPhone shortage during COVID, when shipping delays made people wait months and prices spiked on the grey market. That would look like a minor hiccup compared to what could happen if India blocked production today. And this isn't far-fetched. Countries have used trade and production blockades before as weapons in geopolitical disputes. Now, you might be asking, why would India ever do this? Let's explore some possible scenarios. First, geopolitics. Suppose the United States suddenly imposes fresh tariffs on Indian goods, maybe in sectors like steel, textiles, or IT services. As retaliation, New Delhi could target a high-profile American brand. And what bigger symbol than Apple, the crown jewel of American innovation? Second, domestic politics. India has been tightening rules around labor, taxation, and data storage. If Apple were to resist compliance, the government might turn up the pressure and threaten production. Third, national security. Imagine a scenario where allegations surface that iPhones are leaking sensitive user data or violating cyber laws. Blocking or suspending production could then be justified as a matter of public safety. Fourth, and this one is rarely discussed, local competition. India is nurturing its own smartphone giants like Reliance Jio's upcoming devices. A temporary squeeze on Apple could tilt the market in favor of domestic players. Extreme. Yes. Impossible. Not really. So what happens to Apple in this nightmare scenario? The immediate issue is supply. Apple's global logistics system works on just-in-time manufacturing, meaning there isn't a huge buffer of extra iPhones sitting in warehouse. A sudden halt in India would shrink supply overnight. Even if Apple scrambled to shift production back to China or expand capacity in Vietnam, these changes don't happen instantly. Setting up new factories, hiring workers, and stabilizing quality standards can take years. Hardware manufacturing is not like software. You can't just push an update and call it a day. And here's a fact most people don't know. Vietnam, Apple's other rising hub, currently produces AirPods, iPads, and some MacBooks. But large-scale iPhone assembly? That's still heavily dependent on India and China. Vietnam simply doesn't yet have the workforce scale or infrastructure to suddenly absorb millions of units a month. If India shuts down, there isn't another country like India waiting on the sidelines, which can instantly take over such a massive production job. The financial damage would be staggering. Analysts project that within a couple of years, India could be producing over $40 billion worth of iPhones annually. Cutting that off means billions in lost sales. Wall Street would immediately punish Apple's stock price. Remember, Apple is valued at over $3 trillion. If investor confidence cracks, even a 5% drop would wipe out more value than the GDP of some small countries. And since Apple is not just a phone company but a cornerstone of the global stock market, Its crash would drag down the entire Nasdaq. Pension funds, ETFs, and global investors would all feel the hit. In short, a blockade in India could trigger a financial storm far beyond the tech sector. But let's flip the lens for a moment. What about India? Blocking iPhone production might sound like a bold political statement, but economically, it could backfire. Apple isn't just a brand, it's a job engine. Factories like Foxconn's in Tamil Nadu employ tens of thousands directly, while countless others depend indirectly on supplying parts, logistics, and services. Stopping Apple would throw many of these people out of work. It could also tarnish India's Make in India vision, which is all about attracting global giants to manufacture domestically. If Apple gets blocked, what message would that send to other companies like Tesla, Samsung, or Intel, all of which are considering India for manufacturing expansion? Investors might think twice before betting on India, worried that politics could disrupt business overnight. And then, of course, there's the consumer side. Indians are among the most enthusiastic iPhone buyers in Asia. Apple's sales in India grew by over 50% last year. And Tim Cook himself has called India the brightest spot in Apple's global story. But if local production is blocked, supply in the domestic market would vanish first. Prices would skyrocket on the grey market, with resellers charging double or triple. Imagine paying 2 lakh rupees for a phone that costs 1 lakh today. Buying an iPhone could suddenly feel like buying a Ferrari. The irony here is brutal. Apple shifted production to India partly to make iPhones cheaper and more accessible to Indians, but a ban would make them more unattainable than ever. Would iPhones completely vanish? Probably not. Apple would still have factories in China and Vietnam, but the availability would shrink drastically. Waiting lists could stretch into months. In fact, it might become similar to buying a limited edition product, technically possible, but only for those willing to wait or pay a premium. And here's another angle. Black markets thrive during shortages. Just like PlayStation 5 scalpers charged double during the COVID era, a sudden iPhone shortage could create a parallel market where the rich and desperate pay outrageous sums, while ordinary buyers are locked out. Now here's the twist. Apple would do everything in its power to prevent this situation. That's why Tim Cook personally travels to India, meets political leaders, and reassures them of Apple's long-term commitment. That's why Apple bends quietly to local rules, pays fines when needed, and adapts its strategies. Apple knows that India isn't just another factory location. It's the future of its global growth, especially as sales in China slow down and Europe saturates. For Apple, keeping India happy is no longer optional. It's survival. And let's not forget, this isn't just about phones. If India can hold leverage over Apple, it shows how much power developing nations now wield in global supply chains. A single decision in New Delhi could delay shipments in New York, Tokyo, or London. We've entered an era where geopolitics doesn't just decide wars. It decides whether you can buy the next iPhone. So, could India really bring Apple to its knees? Maybe not completely, but the fact that such a possibility even exists tells us something important. The balance of power is shifting. The world's biggest tech company is now deeply tied to decisions made not just in Silicon Valley or Beijing, but also in New Delhi. And the next time you unlock your phone, just remember, it only takes one order, one headline, or one standoff for that phone to suddenly become a relic of a supply chain that no longer exists.